I came from Italy, came here in 1955. Art was always part of my being. I guess it's part of the Italian gene, I don't know. And then I went around 6th grade, I took this correspondence class, course in art. And my parents realized that I was really interested in that field. So my father built a small little studio in the basement of our house. And I would go to Collier's, the old paint store that they used to have here, and would buy my supplies, had my little easel, and I started painting. I was copying the masters, Italian Renaissance. We all know who those artists were, you know, Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Botticelli and Fra Filippo Lippi and all the others. And so I decided that I wanted to learn, you know, realism, and I wanted to experience that process. So I copied a lot of the old masters. I don't have any of the artwork. I have no idea where they went. I know I sold a couple, you know, for 10 bucks, 5 bucks back then, but I have no idea. So I continued art in high school. Then I went to college. I went to Buffalo State University for art education. I didn't want to play that artist, that starving artist thing. I decided to go into art education. This way I can practice my craft as well as do my art. So I went to Buffalo State, and then my junior year, I went to study in Siena, Italy. And I attended the University of Siena, and then I also attended the Duce Buoninsegna International Art School in Siena. So I learned about fresco painting and how it was done, and again, visiting all the museums and the old masters. Came back, and my senior year, spring semester, before I graduated, I had some elective, you know, so I decided to take this elective course called Fibers. And I'm going, well, you know, fibers, okay, even though I love painting, but I'll take this course. How difficult could it be? It blew me away. I was so involved in the colors, the textures, the yarns, the fabric, all this stuff that I never realized was actually there in this field. I love the professor, Nancy Belford. She was phenomenal in her weavings. As a matter of fact, the museum owns 2 of her very large weavings. I dropped painting, didn't want to do it anymore, and I became a fiber artist. And I used to do the craft shows that Roberson used to have in the 70s and the 80s, because I graduated in 72. My first show started in 75. And I even know the spot I had by the river with my little tent. So I did that little kind of circuit of the craft fairs. In 1980, I had my very first solo show of my weavings. And I don't have any weavings left. I mean, I don't know where they are. These happen to have been by accident, they're here. I was not a good record keeper. You know, you're 21, 22 years old. I mean, your mind is on other things. I sold something, I took the money, and I said, great, that's wonderful. I never really took names down, addresses, etc. So in conversation with some friends of mine from Buffalo, New York, and Philadelphia, we're just talking, you know, I'm having this show, and I'm trying to find some of my weavings and my stitcheries, and they go, do you want to borrow my weaving? I go, you own one of my weavings? Yes. I go, oh my God, yes. I don't know where they are. So I was able to get 4 weavings and 2 stitchery pieces out of my conversation. But the first piece, this little blue piece, 1975, as basically, I'll say that began my career. And I was a fiber artist for about 16 years. I did contemporary tapestry weaving, not the traditional weaving. And my first show was in Algonquin, Maine, where I used to take students every year, and all those sold. Again, this is all I was able to get, a couple from Buffalo and in the local area. After about 16 years of weaving and doing that particular type of circuit, I woke up one day with vertigo. This is the 1980s, to the point where it really messed me up. I couldn't function. I had difficulty functioning. I did go to school and taught. I worked from my desk. Sometimes I'd lie on one of the tables and, you know, talk to the kids. It was really bad. And so I went to Robert Packer here in Sayre, PA, to figure out what's going on with my head, my ears, etc. When they can't figure out what the problem is, they'll tell you it's stress. We suggest you seek professional help. They gave me the name of this psychiatrist, and so I saw him for a year, and I realized he was more messed up than, you know, it wasn't for me. But yeah, the vertigo was still there, and some days I would not have it, which was a blessing, and then all of a sudden it goes back in again. I'd be in the middle of teaching, and all of a sudden I'd have to sit. I used to sing in the choir at church, because I'm Roman Catholic. A nun, friend of mine, says, "Did you ever try regression therapy?" What is that? I don't even know what it is. And she explained it to me. I went to this regression therapist. She was out of Elmira, Janet Cunningham, PhD, regression therapist, certified, and I checked her out to make sure that, because they do hypnosis during the sessions, and I didn't want to go somewhere and not come back, And so I went to her, we had a session, and my first experience was she brought me back to 4th grade. I had just come over from Italy, so my English was not great. As a matter of fact, I didn't even speak English. I had to stumble for words. And Mrs. Hanley, I loved her. She was a great teacher. She said to me, I'm in front of the class, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to be a painter." "Okay, you want to paint houses?" And I go, no, I want to paint like Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Sandro Botticelli, Fra Filippo Lippi. I'm naming all these artists, and her eyes are like going crazy, like, who are these people? I come out of the regression, and the therapist, Janet says, "Okay, so you're in front of your class, 4th, and you want to be a painter. So are you painting?" And I went, "No, I'm weaving." Well, maybe you should do a little bit of painting. Maybe you should go back to that. And I went, Well, she says, "In looking at you, I'm looking at your face and your forehead, and I feel that third eye area that we all have in this little dimension here between both of our eyes, right here in the middle of your forehead, is blocked. I don't see much movement. Maybe you should start painting again, and maybe it'll open up." So now I'm starting to work with this panel. Now I'm getting very confused. I mean, there's a lot of confusion in the canvas itself. You'll see what I call abstractions of teepees. A lot of red, a lot of fire, a lot of heads flying around like it's crazy. Like, what? I said, what the hell is going on? So I stopped. I called the regression therapist. "You got to come to the studio. You got to see what's going on. Indigenous something, I don't know what." So she comes, she looks at everything. She goes, "Why don't you put the paintings together?" Because I had them in different areas. So putting the paintings together, we noticed that they were kind of matching, which was not intentional. Like it wasn't something that I was planning. They just all of a sudden was like, "Are you kidding me that these paintings are supposed to be together?" So at that point, I said, "We got to do one more. There's one more panel missing. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. I need help." So she puts me under, and I took graphite and I walked up with my eyes closed, and I'm over here sketching out this entire scenario of these dead natives, an encampment, more fire, etc. I open my eyes, she's bawling, and I'm crying like crazy. I says, "What is this?" She takes out of her bag a transcript. She goes, "Here, you've been illustrating my book." I go, "What book? You writing a book?" "Yes." As a regression therapist, she travels around the country. 24 people that she did work with all went to the same native lifetime and the same massacre. She couldn't figure out what was going on. First of all, she was in shock, but in putting this together, she realized these people came back for a healing. Because during this massacre, especially here, the confusion they're in, not knowing what's going on, etc., they just came back for a healing. And that was her conclusion. And I thought it was, okay, sounds right. So I finished painting the massacre. Europeans are very interested in Native American. And we knew a lot about Native American, and I wanted to be, part of that. So we'd play cowboys and Indians with the neighborhood kids, and I said, "I want to be the Indian, I want to be the Indian." So they shoot me first. And I go, "Wait a minute, what's going on?" He goes, "Well, this is the way it's supposed to be. We kill all the Indians." I go, "Okay." So I'd lay there, and I go, this really isn't much fun. But Native American was always with me somehow in here, especially in the back of my head, because a lot of my weavings were Native in design. Then I was asked to go to Fort Yates Standing Rock Indian Reservation as guest artist for a month when I was teaching at UE High School, and I taught the Oglala Sioux children, which was an amazing experience, So all these little things about indigenous people are always back here. Now I had this particular show of these pieces at Mansfield University way back in the 90s, and their Native American studies professor came to see the show, and he said, well, you gave us honor because all of the natives are facing up and the bluecoats are facing down. During all this time, my vertigo was getting less and less. It didn't go away, it was just less. But I got very angry. I mean, I was really distraught. I went into a depression for a couple years. How can people do this? And they're doing it back then. Of course, it's being done today also. So I started doing these very dark paintings. These dark paintings, they were my therapy. And I actually used the tubes of paint and not even brushes, and just would scratch on the panel and go crazy, like especially on the bottom of this piece. It's just nonsense. But I have halos on all of them because I felt they were divine in their evilness. It's same today, that evilness that, persists. So I did numerous paintings. Now, what you see in this exhibition are bits and pieces of 7 periods of my career. It's not all that I've done. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paintings. But these are a few pieces that I was able to get. And then also this one here. This piece, the only reason why I kind of like to highlight this piece is that when these were shown in a gallery in Soho, there was a gentleman standing in front of the painting during the opening, and I went up to him and I spoke to him and I said, and he was teary-eyed, and I can see there were tears. And I said, what's going on? Can I help you? I'm the artist. Well, to me, this is the Holocaust. These are the Nazis, and these are the victims, the Jews, the spirits have, passed on, and all the chaos and all this agitated stuff. And I said, very interesting. I said, well, what I do love about some of my work, whatever is personal to the viewer is what comes through. Because certainly when I did this, it wasn't about the Holocaust. It was my own personal turmoil that I was going within myself. So that was the end of that. A month later, Schindler's List the movie comes out, and I was homesick from school, and they were doing a review of the movie. It was a New York station, and they had a panel of some survivors, and they were introducing the survivors, and the last person was this gentleman that was in front of my painting. So I was able to call the station. I went to New York, we sat down, had tea, coffee, and he says to me, the reason why this painting it touched me so much was that my parents were 2 of Schindler's kids. I didn't go back to Janet Cunningham, the regression therapist. And by this point, the light at the end of the tunnel, I can see it, and I went right to it, and I started doing all of these angelic pieces. It's like I went through all that turmoil. I went through the killing fields. I went through the whole thing of the native and the massacres, etc. And I can feel the lifting of all this depression, and the vertigo disappeared. Now we're talking about 3 to 4 years after this whole thing started. So I began doing these angelic pieces, and these angelic pieces that were very, very successful. I don't own any of them. And these are the pieces I was able to get. These 2 middle pieces, the green and the kind of blue-green, are owned by the public library, Binghamton Public Library. And Laura Davis owns this piece right here. But anyway, I did tons of these, tons. And I guess people really radiated towards that light and that goodness with the heart. And now the halos actually make sense as opposed to, the divine evil. So I did many of those. Now that I'm feeling better, I can maybe, express myself differently. Art-wise, I can get away from all this. So in dealing with the models that I had, and the many models throughout my career and trips that I've had here and there, a lot of photographs. So artists a lot of times use photographs as a reference when they paint or they copy it completely. I decided, I don't do that. What if I can use those photographs differently? So I did my research, and in the salons of Paris in the 1800s, there was a small little, not art movement, but a creative part of the artists at that time that did what was called photo peinture, a French term. I may not be pronouncing it correctly, but P-E-I-N-T-U-R-E, photo peinture, where artists took photographs, which were black and white, because that was the rage. The new thing was photography. Started collaging them in their, their canvases and boards. So over here, I went through all my what I had, took out all my photographs, and I started doing my own interpretation. And all these photographs I took. I didn't go through magazines and copy. So all of these paintings here, including these, all have a photograph in them. And it's just my interpretation of what photo peinture was, okay? Here you can see it. And I didn't want to fool the viewer, because that's not integrity. So it's photo peinture, they know there's a photograph, and then I would paint the photograph and then bring the photograph somehow out to camouflage so you don't notice that immediately until you get up closer and look at it. So all of these were done that way. A personal trainer bought some of these. And then my weaving, I would incorporate fabric, different stuff I had laying around, collage them in. I would take acids, I would take all sorts of things, scratch into the photograph so that it becomes part of the composition. I imitated this line to kind of confuse the viewer. Is that a photograph or is this the photograph? Which is, and then I would bring it beyond that. So it was my interpretation of this process called photo peinture. Photo peinture never took off as an art movement. It was just a little splash in the pan, a way of doing creative things with photographs. And I just took that process and just made it into my own. And these were very successful. I sold a lot of these in New York. Yeah, I did very well. And some of these, actually Roberson owns that piece right there. Some of these were also shown in Florence, Italy, when I had a show there a few years back. Then I did a button for First Night Binghamton. If you remember First Night, which was December 31st. And I did a button, and the button was this abstraction of these lines, and it was of Binghamton. And I included the two rivers, etc. And NBT Bank approached me, and they said, we would like to commission you to do some paintings for our bank and the Northgate Plaza branch. I said, sure, but we like that button that you designed. Can you do something with that kind of abstraction? So I did. All these have the two rivers, different seasons of the Binghamton area. They all have an image. Here's Roberson Museum, and that's St. Pat's Church from Memorial Street Bridge, the confluence. And of course, that's Old City Hall. And then this is the view from Front Street looking over the river of Binghamton. So these hang in their bank. I've done many commissions. The biggest one I just finished, it's been a year now. The new Wilson Tower in Johnson City. They gave me a 40-foot wall, and I did an installation of what I'm going to talk about next on that particular wall. And UHS, I need to applaud them, because they have really noticed the art, the talent that's in this area. Their buildings have artwork from artists within 100 miles of the Binghamton area, in their banks, in their lobbies, and in their rooms. The towers have an original art piece in all the rooms. So that was a 1.5-year project, and it was exciting to do, scary, because I never did anything to that magnitude, because the pieces are huge. They're like 72 by, they're big, 72 by 72, 4 of them. And That process is the process I do right now. That's what I'm doing currently, which is a type of encaustic, which is oil and wax together. But I mix my own. I get my Dorland's wax and my oil paints and I mix it with tar. Tar is something I added a little bit later. Why tar? What does tar do? I put tar on the wood panels. Now everything is done in wood. Nothing, if I use canvas, it could eventually burn. When you're doing encaustic, which is wax and oil, you have to bind it with heat to solidify and to fuse and meld everything together. So you use a hair dryer or a heat gun. Because I'm mixing my own and I'm using tar, I need something stronger. So everything's done with a blowtorch. So if ever you walk into my studio and you smell gas, it means I've been working there. So I take tar and put it on here at random. And I leave part of the wood exposed. I don't cover the whole thing. Because I want it to be a surprise and an exploration at the end. Like, where is the tar? Where isn't the tar? And then I start painting with sponges, rags, my fingers, spatulas. I have spatulas this wide that I use and paint. And so I've discarded all my brushes. I don't use brushes ever again. I don't use them at all. So I paint in that manner. And what I've been doing these last few years is abstractions of landscape. And we took a trip to Quebec City. There's a national park outside the city with a big waterfall. And to go up there, you have to take a cable car. And you're on top, and you're walking through this woods. The most beautiful scenery you can imagine. And it was October. The colors were spectacular. I was blown away. And I'm there taking photographs and filming. So a lot of these pieces are the inspiration of those particular trees and that I saw. So I paint, I put on, and then I torch. I torch flat so that the wax and the colors don't run. If I want that effect, I would do it, setting up. But I do a lot of torching, so it's layers and layers of paint, torching, back and forth. I do wear a mask, but when I start working on a certain area and I have to torch, I really don't wear a mask, but if I'm doing a large area. Then I take a very expensive tool called a nail that I get at Lowe's, and I start to do a lot of sgraffito, which is cutting into. And so when I cut in with a nail, the tar comes through almost as like it's a pencil line or graphite. Some areas you don't see the tar because the tar was never there. So I do a lot of scratching and a lot of very furious lines to create, the ground, textures, etc. You can feel it's not like an oil painting at all. And again, all of that on the bottom. Then I decided, it just needs something. So I just happen to have some 23 karat Florentine gold leaf. So I put some of the gold leaf, and there's here, and there's also another painting back there that has the same thing. And the same with this. And you can actually probably see the textures from the blowtorch. The blowtorch creates the textures. I let the flame, as I'm torching, I let the create a flame, let it produce these bubbles. Then I blow it out, let it dry, and that solidifies. It becomes hard. Back to my weaving days, I love textures. And you can also see some of the colors I repeat. All of these paintings here and out in the foyer, except for my portrait, are done in this method. And what's really also wonderful about this show is I have to also thank my collectors. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be having this show. When Roberson approached me on it, I really didn't have a lot of pieces, and I'm going to knock on wood because I do sell, so I didn't have enough to really fill. But then when I decided maybe a retrospect or an idea of that kind of show would be wonderful, I called my collectors. Some pieces are from Florida, New York, Buffalo, all over the place, and a lot of, community. And but I also have to thank this man right here, Michael Grasso, the executive director of the museum. Well, first of all, for offering me the show, but for what he has done with the museum, bringing in community artists. And this capital project that they're doing, this museum is going to look top notch. So he's, and also I have that gentleman over there, Peter, who is phenomenal at hanging artwork and knowing exactly where everything goes, and his sidekick, Roberta, if she's not here, but Roberson has been wonderful. They've been a great organization to work with. I thank them for what they did. There's also a catalog of the show downstairs if you're interested. But they really, I mean, this show is beautiful. Not to say it's my work, but the way it's hung. No, really, the way it's hung, the flow. And I gotta have to thank Peter and Roberta for a lot of that.